Hello, welcome to Very IT. My name is Prabdeep and I'm the founder and lead instructor at Very IT. Now in this session we're going to cover 5 main different topics. Firstly, we'll cover a brief overview of PowerShell. Secondly, we'll be covering installing and launching PowerShell core. Thirdly, we'll be covering installing and launching PowerShell ISE. Fourthly, we'll be looking at installing and launching Visual Studio Code, as well as adding the extension of PowerShell ISE. And lastly, we'll be covering get command, the help command, as well as comments. If you can also do a great favor by hitting that like and subscribe button, that'd be greatly appreciated. In this session, we're going to be looking at how to install PowerShell. Now, as you can see, we're currently on my Windows desktop PC. So what we're going to do is navigate to the bottom left corner. Bear in mind, this is Windows PowerShell 11. And we're going to search for PowerShell. And as you can see, the option for Windows PowerShell appears. Now, when I go over to this is the standard one that comes by default with Windows 11. So if I were to now search for the version table, PS version table, this will now in turn reveal the version of PowerShell. Now this should be the 5.1 upwards, which is the one that's provided with Windows by default. However, what we need to do is install the PowerShell core. Here we're going to be looking at installing PowerShell core. In order to do so, we'll need to navigate over to the Google Chrome browser or a browser of your choice and search for PowerShell core download, and that will then put us forward to the Microsoft website where we can do the installation. So in order to do so, we're going to navigate to the top left and search for PowerShell core download. Now we're going to select the option for installing PowerShell or Windows. Obviously, it will change this website as time does go on by, but this is the one we're doing at the time of recording from Microsoft's website. Now what you'll notice is that on the left hand pane, you'll have a different variant of the PowerShell, just updated now, and the one that we'll need to select is the one that's applicable to ourselves, which is 7.4 at the time of recording. That being said, there are different variants. I'm not picking 7.5 as that's a preview variant and that could potentially have bugs, so we're just going to pick the stable version, which is 7.4. Upon doing so, you're going to find that everything will filter down, and if we scroll to the bottom of the page, or near the bottom over here, we'll notice that there is installing the MSI package. The one that we're going to be installing is the PowerShell 7.4.5, the 64-bit version. So once I initiate the download, you should notice that it starts downloading. Now ahead of time, I've already got the installation file, so I'm just going to drag it over from my downloads folder so that you guys can see it. And I'm just going to double click onto this in order to initiate the installation. Now when we do so, this is going to launch the welcome to the PowerShell 7 64-bit version. So we're going to select next, and this will then outline as to what version, what file path we want to have this installed on. We're going to leave the default one, and then the optional actions, just leave the default ones as before. And again, we're going to leave the default here as well. And we're going to initiate the installation. Now, it might prompt you for user account control prompt. Let the installation now take its course. And select yes for the user account control prompt. Now you can see that is how it has now finished. We're going to select Launch PowerShell when we select Finish. And what you'll notice now is that PowerShell has launched, and we can see it's 7.4.5. we were to just double check the version, we would simply search for the PS version table, and that will in turn outline the version of PowerShell. Now, PowerShell ISE, namely known as the Integrating Scripting System, is used with PowerShell. Now, you can use it to write and debug scripts. You have multi-line editing, you have syntax, coloring, and also you can open up additional tabs. The great thing is it comes with IntelliSense. And what that essentially means is that it will enable you to auto-populate with certain commands. It will give you hints as well. You don't need to remember all of the respective commands, the syntax, or parameters. That's a great thing with IntelliSense. So for example, there are a few shortcuts that we'll run through when we do a screen share, but primarily F8 will run a selection of that script, whilst F5 will run the entire code. And the great thing is you can copy and paste, can clear and open multi-line scripts in the tab. So here we're now going to launch PowerShell ISE. So in order to do so, go on the Windows Start button and search for PowerShell ISE, and that will launch Windows PowerShell ISE when you select that option. Drag it across. Now we're going to do a quick overview of the Windows PowerShell ISE. So the top pane over here is essentially what we call our script pane, and the bottom pane over here is what we call our console pane. Now at the top, the best way to think of it is where you would essentially formulate your scripts, but you're not actually running it. And the bottom one is where you would primarily have the output of it. That being said, you can modify your scripts at the bottom over here, but generally like to split it into two ways where you're compiling at the top. Think of it like Notepad, and the bottom is where the output is. But again, you can modify it there as well if you wish to. So for example, if we were to do get-service, that will now have like IntelliSense, which will auto-populate and give you suggestions as to what the script should be. If I were to select that, normally what we would do in PowerShell, we would press enter to run it. But in this scenario over here, what we're going to do is use these buttons over here. Now the first one over here is run script. This would run everything that's within the top pane in one go. But the other one, which is the F8, that runs a selection. That would essentially run a certain command in question. So if I were to select get service with the run script F5, that will now generate the output at the bottom, which outline, for example, all the services that are available within PowerShell. That being said, if I wanted to run a selection, so if we had multiple lines, we would then just highlight the text in question and then run selection. Now, going across the rest of the pane, what you have over here is a clear console pane. So if you wish to clear out everything that you got, you select this icon over here, and that will clear the output below. If you wish to open up a new Windows PowerShell ISE, if you want to run multiple scripts, you can open up another tab over here and you can toggle between them. So for example, you could have one which is primarily dealing with on-premise Active Directory, whilst the other one is running through Microsoft Entra ID, for example. So you can have multiple ones over here. Furthermore, if you wish to open up just regular Windows PowerShell 5.1, then that would open up this window over here. I'll just drag it across. That will be in its own entire window. The great thing as well is you do have this pane over here where you can kind of toggle it between the views if you wish to. I tend to prefer the default option here. Furthermore, you do have a command window as well if you want it to pop out over here, but I generally prefer it to be of this, where you have all your commands on the right hand side should you wish to toggle and check which ones you need as you are compiling your scripts. So for example, if I wanted to look at anything to do with App Locker, this will now in turn provide me all the suggested commands associated with app locker, but you can check it in your own time in terms of what is appropriate for your use case. That being said, if you want to also color coordinate some of your script, say for example you want to understand which ones are your parameters, which ones are your scripts, which ones are your comments, etc., what you can do is go over to the tools pane over here and go to options, and then thereby you can update the color. So for example, if I were to do get-service again, you can see by default it is blue. But if I wish to change that color, if I go to tools options and go to the script pane and I change the command and I want to make it, for example, red, click on OK, you now see it changes to red. And you can do the same for different areas, which we'll run through as well in terms of what they are. But should you wish to change the color back to default, what you need to do is go back to tools, options, and there's an option whereby you can restore defaults. You click OK and apply. Notice it will go back to the regular blue one over here. Here we're going to be looking at Visual Studio Code. Now Visual Studio Code is open source, which basically means that you can develop the extensions. You have to download it from the Microsoft website and you can use it with multiple languages. It could be anything such as Python, PowerShell, C++, and many more. Provided that there is an extension which will run you through, you can use that specific language within Visual Studio Code. In the example that we're going to run through, we're going to be downloading the PowerShell extension to use within PowerShell ISE. Thereby, Visual Studio Code will behave like PowerShell ISE. Here, we're going to be installing Visual Studio Code. In order to do so, we're going to launch Google Chrome browser and we're going to search for Visual Studio Code download. Upon doing so, this will reveal the following search result for Visual Studio Code. When we do select it, this will in turn reveal all the respective download files. Now, they are for different operating systems, so pick the one that's appropriate to yourself. In this scenario here, we're going to be selecting the Windows 11. However, that being said, pick the one that's appropriate to you and it will auto-detect it. Upon us doing so, it will then initiate the download. Now, I've already downloaded it and I've put it on my desktop file from my downloads folder. So we're just going to simply run this now over here. And this will in turn will reveal the Visual Studio Code wizard. I'm just going to drag it from my other window over here. And just review the actual license agreement. And when you're okay, click on I accept the agreement on the radio button below. Click on next, and this will select the destination location. Select next. I already have it, but I'm just going to just overwrite it for now. I'm going to pick the default display name in the start menu folder. And also selecting additional tasks. Just make sure that the add to path is selected. Select next, and we'll initiate the installation now. Click on finish. So I'm just going to uncheck the launch Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to finish and then search for Visual Studio Code from here. Upon doing so, you're going to be presented with the following option over here. Now, what I've done in advance is I had to install the Visual Studio Code extension, so PowerShell extension. To do so, what you'll do is go to the left-hand pane where it says extension and search for PowerShell. And that in turn will have the PowerShell extension. So when you select that to install, you'll need to restart Visual Studio Code, and thereby it will in turn have the PowerShell extension. Furthermore, another thing you need to be aware of is that in terms of the default layout, it doesn't have the PowerShell ISE interface. So in order to reveal that, what you'll need to do is go over to the view command palette, and then you'll need to ensure that you select PowerShell ISE, so PowerShell enable ISE mode. Upon doing so, this will in turn reveal the following option over here. Now, as before, it does have the PowerShell ISE user interface, whereby you've got the session at the top and the console at the bottom. So, for example, if I were to search for get-service, you can see it's got the IntelliSense, whereby it will predict as to what it is, what command line you also need. So upon doing so, you have that over here. And then you can select the run command or alternatively run selection. I'll just hide myself over here for one moment. So you'll find that on the top right over here, we do have the run as well as the run selection over here. So if I were to select run, at the bottom of the console, you will see that it does reveal the output from that respective option over there. Alternatively, you also do have the run selection as well. You can split the editor if you wish to, but I prefer to just keep it as a default one. You also can move it left as well as in other ways as well if you wish to. But yeah, that's pretty much an overview of how to install Visual Studio Code, as well as how you go about installing the PowerShell ISE extension so that you can in turn replicate what the interface of PowerShell ISE is within Visual Studio Code. Now, PowerShell has a lot of commands, functions, as well as parameters, and quite often you will need help to be able to troubleshoot and debug your script. So we'll be running through the help function within PowerShell. In this session, we're going to be running through an overview within PowerShell ISE around the get command, the help command, as well as comments and best practices. So how we'll split the screen is on the left-hand pane is all about the PowerShell ISE in relation to commands that we're going to run, as well as the output from below, and the notes on the right-hand side within Notepad. So the first thing is where we're going to be looking at any commands that have the name service within them. So whenever we are using PowerShell ISE, you'll find that it will use IntelliSense where it will do the auto-populate. The first one is where we want to look at any command that has the word service within their name. So we're going to go to get-command. I'm just going to press tab, whereby the service in question, we're going to use a wildcard. We're looking for any commands whereby it has the word service within them. Press F8. And you can see here are all the commands below that actually have the word service within them. But they are a mixture of functions, commandlets, and applications. Next one is to find anything whereby all of these at the bottom over here are filtered down to commandlets. So again, we're going to repeat the above, but this time we're going to ensure that the command type is commandlet. So again, we're going to use where the command type is going to be commandlet. Press tab. And if we were to run this, you can now see as from above, where it was initially had a command type of functions, commandlet, and application. Now it's just commandlet. Third example is going to be around ensuring that the commandlet, we're filtering it down and retrieving the get-service. So to do so, we're going to go to get-command again. However, the name is going to be get-service. -service. If we were to run this one over here, this will retrieve the actual name get-service, as you can see over here. Moving to our next one is around help. Now, help will have a number of different features, so they'll include things around full detailed examples, online, parameter, and show window. Now we're going to repeat the above, but this time we're going to be doing it for the help, get-help. So we're going to look at get-help firstly, and that will be a wide resource around PowerShell. However, it's quite large and you need to be able to filter down based on your use name, your use context. So you can see here are all the respective wide high-level overview around the help above over here. That being said, we now want to be able to filter it based on the service. So we're going to go to get-help, but this time we're going to be using the wildcard service. And this is going to return anything whereby the help section does have service within the name. On over here. The next one we're going to be running is around here, whereby it's filtered based upon the commandlet instead of including functions. So again, we're going to repeat the above, but this time we're going to ensure that the category is a commandlet. And again, like above, it's filtered it down without including functions, so it's all just purely commandlet. The next one we're going to run through is about ensuring we can get service, retrieve get service from here. So again, it's the get-help whereby we're going to retrieve specifically get-service from here. Run this. It's going to retrieve just the get service and what that's all about. However, if we want more detail around it, then we can include the extension of detailed as well. So we repeat the above. This time we're going to include detailed in here. This one I'll give a lot more detailed information around the get-service. So it's going to include things such as a name, the syntax, the parameters around it, the aliases, and the remark. That's this one over here. The next one we're going to run through is to get the example use cases of how to use the get-service. So to do that, we're going to run get-help. Whereby we're going to select get-service, whereby the example, we'll be looking at examples associated with get-service. So as you can see over here, this will give you examples as to when you can use the get-service. However, it can't display, don't display partial help on this at the moment. We'll have to update our files on our documentation within PowerShell. We can get more information around the parameters that you can use in conjunction with get-service. So to do so, I'm going to go to get-help. We're going to be looking at the get-service. Look at the parameter. We don't want to filter it on any specific parameter, so we're going to just keep it as the wildcard. And this will show all the respective parameters that you can use with get-service and what they specifically will be able to do with them as well. So you can include things such as a computer name, the dependent services, the display name, what you can exclude, the include, input objects, the names, the required services, and so forth. The next one is if we want to update our documentation within PowerShell as well, we can use the update-help. And this will essentially update any help documentation that it makes reference to within PowerShell. So if we were to run this, it may take a little bit of time for it to update the guide within PowerShell, but you can see it's updating the help for all the respective modules. It will go in alphabetical order. It will take a little bit of time. Let's just run through. It may take about a few minutes, so bear with me for one moment. So it's pretty much updated most of it. There are a few that it has not updated. I have to look as to why that's the case, but may just need some updates, which I'll have to run through. That's some permission issue over here. That being said, that is how you essentially would update the documentation within the PowerShell that it makes reference to during the help. Moving over to comments now. Now, comments are very important mainly because that's what gives you information around documentation when you are writing any of the script as to what that script makes reference to. It could be at the point at which you are writing that script, you understand what it is, but give it a matter of a few weeks or months later, you may have lost context. So by putting in notes is very important. Also, when it comes down to debugging, you can refer back to it to understand, if there's any interdependencies that may have caused an impact on another element of a script. Now, when you are writing comments, best practice is just to put a hash in front of it. So, for example, if I was going to write get-service again, we could just put a note in saying that, put a hash in, and we'll say this will retrieve services within PowerShell. Yep. And that's basically a single line comment. On the other hand, if we want to do multi-line comment, we could say, for example, get-service. It could be new-service. Very basic example, but just give you some idea. And let's say, for example, this is your first script, and then you want to hold on to it and try another one. Best practice is just to put a hash on this one, and this one will then in turn be your updated one. So you could potentially just run this initially. And then let's say, for example, you say, you know what, I don't want to run that one. So what you could do is put the hash on here and then take the hash off the other one, and thereby that would run your initial script that you would have had. But so by putting a hash in front of one of them, you can then activate another one. Thereby you can always make reference to your earlier script if you need to recover it. Lastly, if you are having to Have a multi-line script. Best practice is to have this arrow pointing backwards with a hash. And then you can put your comments in here. Comment 1, comment 2. It could be a long comment. And when you finish that comment associated with the script, you can thereby finish it off with a hash and an outer script. And that's a multi-line comment. So if you've got a series of scripts in between here, you can then include them there as well. And that concludes an overview of the get function, the help function, as well as comments. So in summary, we've covered 5 main different topics. Namely, we covered an overview of Windows PowerShell, followed by installing and launching PowerShell Core, installing and launching PowerShell ISE, installing and launching Visual Studio Code, and adding the extension for PowerShell ISE. And lastly, we ran through an overview of the get command, the help command, as well as comments. So hopefully you found that session really useful. If you can do a great favor by hitting that like and subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. Many thanks. Bye for now.